Adolescence on Netflix is a 4-part miniseries about a young boy who, spoiler alert, and there are going to be spoilers in here, who commits a crime because he is being bullied online, it turns out, by one of the girls in her class. Now, why the bullying starts, who's to blame, who's not really to blame, the series answers all these questions and also doesn't answer all these questions. Each of the 4 parts takes place from the perspective of a different character, give and take. And I think depending on your age group perhaps, or your particular concerns, each episode will resonate with you differently and you will have a best. I think for me, being a parent, the best episode for me is very much episode 4. Another part of Adolescence is also tackling the whole issue of social media and parental guidance and who the things that your kids are involved in on social media and you don't even know. Now, there are a lot of parents who are going to, or people who will jump up and government regulations and say, shut social media down, or social media is bad, or this, that, and the other. And I remember growing up in the 80s, when I used to read a lot. I'd go out and play also, but I was a huge reader. You would see me behind a book all the time. We'd go out to dinner and I'd carry a book with me, and we'd go out to a party at someone's house and I'd carry a book with me. The way today kids are on their phone, and they open their phone, I suppose, at any opportunity to see, to check things, to check chats, send Snapchat, etc. to each other. I don't know, I suppose I'm saying Snapchat, and at some point in time I'll be dating myself. Maybe I'm already dating myself and that doesn't exist anymore. Technology is changing so fast, and this is one of the hard things with parents trying to keep up with all this stuff. But back in the day when I was always reading, and certainly my parents really didn't know what I was reading, so I had carte blanche on what I was reading and what not. And there were certain books that I wasn't allowed to read if my mother would have gotten hold of them, and they weren't anything bad. They were like Sweet Dreams. The Sweet Dreams was this romance series back in the day, and some of the titles would be Mr. Right, and the covers would have a guy and a girl on them. And being from the culture that I'm from, which is a very conservative, traditional culture where boys and girls are apparently not supposed to have anything to do with each other until they, on their wedding night, when they're suddenly supposed to be naked after living a lifetime of not even seeing each other or exchanging 2 words. Those sort of book covers would have gotten me into trouble. And I think there was one book cover which I did put brown paper. I did that cliche of covering it with brown paper and pretending that it was a textbook. I forget which book that was. I think it might well have been Mr. Right, the Sweet Dreams one, because I did get into a lot of trouble in that. I was carrying it in the car and my dad saw, and he was really horrified as to why I was reading a novel called Mr. Right. Anyway, I don't think reading books ruined me any more than the radio and listening to songs ended up ruining anyone, any more than TV ruined a whole generation, or movies did, or any of the pop culture that comes around. And each generation tends to have its own pop culture moment or pop cultural ideology or newness and stuff. And today with social media, with the rise of TikToks and Instagrams and who knows down the line what else, and YouTubes and all sorts of stuff, where it's absolutely, the days of 3 TV channels or just one, depending on the country, where the family sits gathered around the TV and stuff, seem to in many respects be long gone. Today with streaming services and so much available online, everyone seems to be living in their own little bubble. But back in the day, I too, via books, was, one could say, living in my own little bubble. And no one really, unless someone was reading a book or something with me in tandem, one could say that I was reading that book by myself. It was my own small little bubble, and I was the only one having that particular experience. The way kids today watch what they do online and have their own particular experience. So Part of the series Adolescence talks about, or at least tries to grapple with, the fact that kids are unmonitored watching whatever they want to watch and joining chats and whatnot, and what to do about this and how it can take them into a negative, bad way. Now, the thing is, I think in my own time period or across history, and I will say this as a parent, and also I realized this before I ever became a parent, which is why I then chose to parent in this way, is that you have to be involved in your children's lives to a certain extent without necessarily looking like you are monitoring them and saying, no, you can't do this or you can't do that. But at least you should be aware of what your children are watching, what they're reading, perhaps what conversations are taking place with their friends. Some kids are very territorial and very private, and they will not like it. And so as a parent, it's almost your job to find a way to connect with your child, and if not have them share everything with you, at least get some sort of sense of where your child is at. It's always shocking to me when parents don't, when we find kids who have gone to school and done terrible things, and their parents apparently didn't know that the kids had things in their bedrooms for months on age, and have, I think, step into your child's bedroom when they are there. Do not do secret searches, please, of anyone's bedroom. It's a violation of privacy. I remember growing up, that would happen to me all the time, and I can tell you it doesn't foster a good parent-child relationship when you've gone to school or you've gone wherever and you don't know if your parents are going to violate your privacy behind your back and start opening drawers and closets and stuff and find your cigarettes or find your whatever the hell it is you're trying to, whichever way you rebel. And it's not going to foster a very loving, friendly relationship. And yeah, to some extent, parents do need to be friends, especially parents these days. You have to walk the fine line between being a parent and between being a friend. So how to walk this fine line, or how to be involved in a way in your child's life where you do know what is going on with them. I mean, number one, if your child starts to act differently, if a polite child is suddenly very rude to you, in the same way, if a not terribly polite child is suddenly very polite to you, something's changed, something's shifted. And as a parent, you have to read the weather. You have to read what's going on in that room. Now, adolescence is about the way social media can go bad, and if you're not involved in your child's life to at least, even to the extent where you at least know who they're friends with, what they might be talking about, what they're watching, etc. Clearly, I'm sure the child, the adolescent in adolescence, must have exhibited some behaviors to a certain extent that seemed off kilter from his general personality, and it's the parent's job really to pick up on that. And I'm sorry, it is a parent's job. Whether you, after you pick up on it, do something about it or not, it's a separate story. But knowing your child's personality to a certain extent, whether you know it really or not, and then seeing if they act a little different from that is a pretty good clue that something is going on in that child's life. I think adolescence manages to, I think one of the most horrific examples for me actually of environments which parents are not necessarily part of, actually probably not part of, is the school environment, where I think it's episode 2 where the detectives, where the police inspectors go to visit the adolescent school, and it's horrifying. Everyone seems to be bullying everyone. The teachers are getting bullied. It's a really, really horrific environment. I don't know who's learning or studying anything until they really want to, but emotionally it's a very, very ugly environment. And I remember when my kids were going up the school that they would have lunches. You could have lunch with your children, and at least in the cafeteria, you would see the atmosphere of the school and how everyone's behaving. And true, it was, there were regulations and stuff, but nevertheless, you'd get a sense of what type of school it is, what type of whatever. This isn't, granted, a middle school, and by middle school, by high school, parents seem to be completely devoid of visiting the school environment or knowing what's going on, except middle school parent-teacher meetings. And I think in high school, even those come to an end, give and take, in certain cultures and certain places. But so the school that we visited in Adolescence is really horrendous and hardly a nurturing place. That brings us back to then the home having to be a nurturing and safe place, and putting double onus on the parents to try to be friends for their children and try to monitor their emotions also. And in this case, in the case of Adolescent, we see that fail completely. And so back to my favorite episode, which was the last episode, episode 4, where the parents, who seem perfectly reasonable people with, yes, their own traumas, their own happiness, their own relationship, suddenly having kids. And of course, no one needs permission to have kids if you're biologically able to. Lo and behold, 9 months later, you have a little human being that you have to take care of physically and emotionally. And the parents really grapple with, they ask each other, where did we go wrong? What did we do? How did this happen? How did this happen under our watch? Did we do something? And I think for me, the most beautiful and most touching line is the adolescent actually has an older sister who we see herself is being bullied or herself is facing issues. And at one point, the mother turns to the father and she says, that... yes, we made him, we made the son, but we made her also. And the beauty of that line, for me, really captures nurture versus nature. You can nurture in the best way possible, but sometimes, unfortunately, that nature, given certain circumstances, will press in, versus sometimes the nurture, given a certain nature, might press in. Peer pressure is a really, really hard and terrible thing. I know that I have often been in circumstances and done stuff perhaps which I would not have if it wasn't for peer pressure, but also I may not have if I had been brought up in a certain way where a teacher or an elder or an older person or a parent or someone, I'd been able to trust them to be friendly enough where I would not be shamed, or I would not be made to feel like a terrible person. Actually, in my culture, everything came down to who would marry me, because apparently no one was going to marry me. And the fear of getting another lecture on no one was going to marry me and I was ruining my life and everyone else's life really kept me away from having a close relationship with my parents and with a lot of adults, even teachers for that matter. There was no safe place where I was growing up. And I think it's the lack of safe places, lack of safe communication and safe places as far as the child is concerned. See, as a parent, you may think that you have provided a safe place, but the child may think differently, and it's the child who has to communicate with you. But try always, as a parent, no matter how much that child is butting heads with you, try to communicate. Try to find ways to communicate with that child. Without threatening, without guilt, without whatever. It's very, very hard. Having a child is not just being able to produce a child physically. Once you produce that child physically, once that first year, first, second, third year, once they get older, sometimes actually what ends up happening is that physically they need you less, but that's when you have to emotionally parent each child as they need to be parented. Parenting is really, really hard when you think of it in terms of emotional parenting and not just physical parenting. Everyone can go out and buy groceries and stock the fridge and hopefully keep a roof over your head and provide you with a warm bed, a warm shower, etc. Fingers crossed, hopefully every parent, I hope, is able to provide that to the best of their abilities, given their own circumstances. But sometimes children who may not be provided all these physical, material luxuries have parents who are able to provide something I would say might be even more important, which is the emotional luxury, the spiritual luxury of having a parent you can trust to not get you into trouble, to not be a tyrant over you. Children who have parents who are able to form friendly connections, spiritual connections with them, trust connections, safety connections, trust and safety. If you are able to provide an emotional home where your child feels that they can trust you and they are emotionally safe, sometimes that may be more important than a fridge full of every chocolate in the world. And that's what Adolescence, I think it is about. It shows us what safety means for a child and what nature and nurture does, and the parents and the way they grapple at the end. And that ending scene is worth watching for episodes. I think in the beginning the episodes did drag a little bit for me because I wasn't sure where they were going or what I was watching, but it is absolutely worth watching. whether you're a parent or whether you're a teenager. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend a very young child to watch this. It's very traumatic. And unless, again, you're a parent who has the sort of relationship where you can discuss what this child and you have watched together, rather than just having them watch it and then going to their room and shut the door and stay with all these emotions themselves. If then I'd recommend it for older children, for teenagers, rather than, 8, 9, 10 years old. They may not know what they're watching per se. It's a very intense 4 episodes. Okay, thank you. Bye.